Hello there. Hello, Ali. And Mel Fly. Nice to see you again. And Marion and Kelly. I think I saw your name, and she reads a lot. And then I sat down. So for those of you who are new and don't know, I can't see the screen when I'm reading. I read to you guys. That's what Fireside Reading is. And together, over the course of a period of time, we read these lovely old books together. My name's Gildart. And every day at 5 we get together. It's a lovely group of people, and I'm so glad for your company, and I love doing this, and I'm so glad so many of you love it too. Currently, we're reading The Woman in White. I had a day off yesterday. Happy Memorial Day, everybody. I hope you all had a lovely weekend. And today we're getting back to it. And we have left Walter Hartwright in The Woman in White. Now he's finally been reconciled with his love, Laura Fairley, who isn't dead, fortunately, and the wonderful, indomitable Marion. And she and the three of them are now living in a out-of-the-way place in London very cheaply. And he is attempting to clear Laura's name, to bring her effectively back from the dead, from the legal perspective. So he is setting off to see the lawyer. Mr. Gilmore is the family solicitor, and he is sick, so everything has been turned over to his partner, Mr. Curl. So Walter is heading to see Mr. Curl to see how he could put things right. Welcome to a Fireside Reading of The Woman in White by Wilkie Collins, reading 54, chapter 4. No circumstance of the slightest importance happened on my way to the offices of Messrs. Gilmore and Curl in Chancery Lane. While my card was being taken in to Mr. Curl, a consideration occurred to me which I deeply regretted not having thought of before. The information derived from Marion's diary made it a matter of certainty that Count Fosco had opened her first letter from Blackwater Park to Mr. Curl, and had, by means of his wife, intercepted the second. He was therefore well aware of the address of the office, and he would naturally infer that if Marion wanted advice and assistance after Laura's escape from the asylum, she would apply once more to the experience of Mr. Curl. In this case, the office in Chancery Lane was the very first place which he and Sir Percival would cause to be watched, and if the same persons were chosen for the purpose who had been employed to follow me before my departure from England, the fact of my return would in all probability be ascertained on that very day. I had thought generally of the chances of my being recognized in the streets, but the special risk connected with the office had never occurred to me until the present moment. It was too late now to repair this unfortunate error in judgment, too late to wish that I had made arrangements for meeting the lawyer in some place privately appointed beforehand. I could only resolve to be cautious on leaving Chancery Lane, and not to go straight home again under any circumstances whatever. After waiting a few minutes, I was shown into Mr. Curl's private room. He was a pale, thin, quiet, self-possessed man, with a very attentive eye, a very low voice, and a very undemonstrative manner, not, as I judged, ready with his sympathy where strangers were concerned, and not at all easy to disturb in his professional composure. A better man for my purpose could hardly have been found. If he committed himself to a decision at all, and if the decision was favourable, the strength of our case was as good as proved from that moment. "Before I enter on the business which brings me here," I said, "I ought to warn you, Mr. Curl, that the shortest statement I can make of it may occupy some little time. "My time is at Miss Holcomb's disposal," he replied. "Where any interests of hers are concerned, I represent my partner professionally, as well as person. Where any interests of hers are concerned, I represent my partner personally as well as professionally. It was his request that I should do so when he ceased to take an active part in business." "May I inquire where Mr. Gilmore is in England?" "He is not. He is living with his relatives in Germany. His health has improved, but the period of his return is still uncertain." While we were exchanging these few preliminary words, he had been searching among the papers before him, and he now produced from them a sealed letter. I thought he was about to hand the letter to me, but apparently, changing his mind, he placed it by itself on the table, settled himself in his chair, and silently waited to hear what I had to say. Without wasting a moment in prefatory words of any sort, I entered on my narrative and put him in full possession of the events which have already been related in these pages. Lawyer as he was to the very marrow of his bones, I startled him out of his professional composure. Expressions of incredulity and surprise, which he could not repress, interrupted me several times before I had done. I persevered, however, to the end, and as soon as I reached it, boldly asked the one important question: "What is your opinion, Mr. Curl?" He was too cautious to commit himself to an answer without taking time to recover his self-possession first. "Before I give my opinion," he said, "I must beg permission to clear the ground by a few questions." He put the questions, sharp, suspicious, unbelieving questions, which clearly showed me as they proceeded that he thought I was the victim of a delusion, and that he might even have doubted, but for my introduction to him by Miss Holcomb, whether I was not attempting the perpetration of a cunningly designed fraud. "Do you believe that I have spoken the truth, Mr. Curl?" I asked, when he had done examining me. "So far as your own convictions are concerned, I am certain that you have spoken the truth," he replied. "I have the highest esteem for Miss Holcomb, and I have therefore every reason to respect a gentleman whose mediation she trusts in a matter of this kind. I will even go farther, if you like, and admit, for courtesy's sake and for argument's sake, that the identity of Lady Glyde as a living person is a proven fact to Miss Holcomb and yourself. But you come to me for a legal opinion. As a lawyer, and as a lawyer only, it is my duty to tell you, Mr. Hartright, that you have not the shadow of a case." "You put it strongly, Mr. Curl." "I will try to put it plainly as well. The evidence of Lady Glyde's death is, on the face of it, clear and satisfactory. There is her aunt's testimony to prove that she came to Count Fosco's house, that she fell ill, and that she died. There is the testimony of the medical certificate to prove the death, and to show that it took place under natural circumstances. There is the fact of the funeral at Limmeridge, and there is the assertion of the inscription on the tomb. That is the case you want to overthrow. What evidence have you to support the declaration on your side that the person who died and was buried was not Lady Glyde? Let us run through the main points of your statement and see what they are worth. Miss Holcomb goes to a certain private asylum, and there sees a certain female patient. It is known that a woman named Anne Catherick, and bearing an extraordinary personal resemblance to Lady Glyde,
escaped from the asylum. It is known that the person received there last July was received as Anne Catherick brought back. It is known that the gentleman who brought her back warned Mr. Fairley that it was part of her insanity to be bent on personating his dead niece, and it is known that she did repeatedly declare herself in the asylum, where no one believed her to be Lady Glyde. These are all facts. What have you to set against them? Miss Holcomb's recognition of the woman, which recognition, after events, invalidate or contradict. Does Miss Holcomb assert her supposed sister's identity to the owner of the asylum, and take legal means for rescuing her? No, she secretly bribes a nurse to let her escape. When the patient has been released in this doubtful manner and is taken to Mr. Fairley, does he recognize her? Is he staggered for one instant in his belief of his niece's death? No. Do the servants recognize her? No. Is she kept in the neighborhood to assert her own identity and to stand the test of further proceedings? No. She is privately taken to London. In the meantime, you have recognized her also, but you are not a relative. You are not even an old friend of the family. The servants contradict you, and Mr. Fairley contradicts Miss Holcomb, and the supposed Lady Glyde contradicts herself. She declares she passed the night in London at a certain house. Your own evidence shows that she has never been near that house, and your own admission is that her condition of mind prevents you from producing her anywhere to submit to investigation and to speak for herself. I pass over minor points of evidence on both sides to save time, and I ask you, if the case were to go now into a court of law, to go before a jury bound to take facts as they reasonably appear, where are your proofs?
I was obliged to wait and collect myself before I could answer him. It was the first time the story of Laura and the story of Marian had been presented to me from a stranger's point of view. The first time the terrible obstacles that lay across our path had been made to show themselves in their true character. There can be no doubt, I said, that the facts, as you have stated them, appear to tell against us. But you think those facts can be explained away, interposed Mr. Curl. Let me tell you the result of my experience on that point. When an English jury has to choose between a plain fact on the surface and a long explanation under the surface, it always takes the fact in preference to the explanation. For example, Lady Glyde, I call the lady you represent by that name, for argument's sake, declares she has slept at a certain house, and it is proved that she has not slept at that house. You explain this circumstance by entering into the state of her mind and deducing from it a metaphysical conclusion. I don't say the conclusion is wrong. I only say that the jury will take the fact of her contradicting herself in preference to any reason for the contradiction that you can offer. But is it not possible, I urged, by dint of patience and exertion, to discover additional evidence? Miss Holcomb and I have a few £100. He looked at me with a half-suppressed pity and shook his head. Consider the subject, Mr. Hartright, from your own point of view, he said. If you are right about Sir Percival Glyde and Count Fosco, which I don't admit, mind,
Every imaginable difficulty would be thrown in the way of your getting fresh evidence. Every obstacle of litigation would be raised. Every point in the case would be systematically contested. And by the time we had spent our thousands instead of our hundreds, the final result would in all probability be against us. Questions of identity, where instances of personal resemblance are concerned, are in themselves the hardest of all questions to settle, the hardest even when they are free from the complications which beset the case we are now discussing. I really see no prospect of throwing any light whatever on this extraordinary affair. Even if the person buried in Limmeridge churchyard be not Lady Glyde, she was in life, on your own showing, so like her that we should gain nothing if we applied for the necessary authority to have the body exhumed. In short, there is no case, Mr. Hartright. There is really no case.
I was determined to believe that there was a case, and in that determination shifted my ground and appealed to him once more. Are there not other proofs that we might produce besides the proof of identity? I asked.
Not as you are situated, he replied. The simplest and surest of all proofs, the proof by comparison of dates, is, as I understand, altogether out of your reach. If you could show a discrepancy between the date of the doctor's certificate and the date of Lady Glyde's journey to London, the matter would wear a totally different aspect, and I should be the first to say, let us go on.
That date may yet be recovered, Mr. Curll.
On the day when it is recovered, Mr. Hartright, you will have a case. If you have any prospect at this moment of getting at it, tell me, and we shall see if I can advise you.
I considered. The housekeeper could not help us. Laura could not help us. Marion could not help us. In all probability, the only persons in existence who knew the date were Sir Percival and the Count. I can think of no means of ascertaining the date at present, I said, because I can think of no persons who are sure to know it but Count Fosco and Sir Percival Glyde. Mr. Curll's calmly attentive face relaxed for the first time into a smile.
With your opinion of the conduct of those two gentlemen, he said, you don't expect help in that quarter, I presume. If they have combined to gain large sums of money by a conspiracy, they are not likely to confess it, at any rate.
They may be forced to confess it, Mr. Curll.
By whom?
By me. We both rose. He looked me attentively in the face, with more appearance of interest than he had shown yet. I could see that I had perplexed him a little.
You are very determined, he said. You have no doubt a personal motive for proceeding, into which it is not my business to inquire. If a case can be produced in the future, I can only say my best assistance is at your service. At the same time, I must warn you, as the money question always enters into the law question, that I see little hope, even if you ultimately established the fact of Lady Glyde's being alive, of recovering her fortune. The foreigner would probably leave the country before proceedings were commenced, and Sir Percival's embarrassments are numerous enough and pressing enough to transfer almost any sum of money he may possess from himself to his creditors. You are, of course, aware.
I stopped him at that point. Let me beg that we may not discuss Lady Glyde's affairs, I said. I have never known anything about them in former times, and I know nothing about them now, except that her fortune is lost. You are right in assuming that I have personal motives for stirring in this matter. I wish those motives to be always as disinterested as they are at the present moment. He tried to interpose and explain. I was a little heated, I suppose, by feeling that he had doubted me, and I went on bluntly, without waiting to hear him. There shall be no money motive, I said. No idea of personal advantage in the service I mean to render to Lady Glyde. She has been cast out as a stranger from the house in which she was born. A lie which records her death has been written on her mother's tomb, and there are 2 men, alive and unpunished, who are responsible for it. That house shall open again to receive her in the presence of every soul who followed the false funeral to the grave. That lie shall be publicly erased from the tombstone by the authority of the head of the family, and those 2 men shall answer for their crime to me. Though the justice that sits in tribunals is powerless to pursue them, I have given my life to that purpose, and alone as I stand, if God spares me, I will accomplish it. Way to go, Walter. More tomorrow at 5 Pacific at Fireside Reading on Instagram. Golly, I hope he manages. We shall find out. Until I see you all again, everyone, please stay very, very well. Good night.